Tim Carstens, Managing Director, Base Titanium and Base Resources. Pleasure to be speaking to you today.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome to Nairobi, but I think this is your second home anyway.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it was pointed out to me recently, I've been here 109 times
Are you serious?
8 years. Yeah.
In how many years?
8 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's been many. It is a second home.
But soon you're going to tell us you've got some other places to visit as well.
Oh, there are no shortage of places to visit, and we've always had aspirations to grow the business beyond the Kwale project, where we really started the company. But you know, Kenya will always be effectively the home and the launch pad. What I hope will be a pretty substantial mining company in due course.
No, I'm sure. I believe it for one. Tim, you know, the development of Kenya's mining sector, you were really the first real mine. I mean, you know, and I don't mean to dismiss everybody else, but really the first substantial mining operation here in Kenya. In 2013, the mining sector gained an increased profile with the creation of the standalone Ministry of Mining. What have been the outcomes of the government's focus on that?
Yeah, that was a really significant step for Kenya. Is just the creation of that ministry by itself is a real public statement of intent, and the focus has been very strongly on getting the architecture right in Kenya to develop an industry and to manage an effective industry. So we've seen the introduction of a new mining act, the first revision to the mining code here since the 40s. And you know, it's been done with a consultation with industry. It is a quantum leap forward in regulation. There's still some tweaks needed to get it into sort of perfect shape, but it's a really good starting point. There've also been a number of other areas of improvement, particularly around the cadastral system, the way that the titles are managed and the way you go about applying for them. And also the introduction of the Mineral Rights Board that is a very transparent, very public way of reviewing licence applications and making recommendations to the Minister for award. So you know, all of that has provided some really sound architecture for the mining industry to now start to be developed.
So you think the architecture is now in place?
Yeah, the core of it is. I think there are still some areas where it can be improved. It definitely needs to be married up with a really attractive fiscal regime if we're going to sort of get investment mobilised. But you know, that work's underway.
So what is the secret sauce? You've got this mining framework now. What is the next step in growing the mining sector, and what's the government doing to achieve that? I mean, you know, it's great. It's great, and you are a fantastic calling card for Kenya. But what's next for Kenya?
Yeah, the really important thing to understand about mining is it doesn't just happen. You don't just suddenly have someone come in and build a mine. There's a whole process of exploration that has to take place beforehand, and that's a very long cycle. I mean, for example, the Kwale deposit was discovered 15 years before we got involved, and 20 years before it really came into production. So they're very long lead times. So the critical next step for Kenya is attracting that lifeblood of mining, which is the exploration companies, getting them to come in and commit their risk money to drilling holes in the ground to identify those mineral resources. That's the absolutely critical next step. In order to do that, we need to have real consistency of application of the rules, transparency, giving people the confidence that if they come in and spend their money, then they're going to be able to to continue to operate and progress right through to a mine. Now, heading towards that, the ministry has done a lot over the last couple of years in really promoting Kenya as a mining destination, and I have to tip my hat to Cabinet Secretary Kazunga, who's done a superb job, and I've had the singular honour of presenting at a few conferences with him, and he's certainly known in Australia at the Africa Down Under conference as the rockstar minister.
Yes.
I thought he
was as evangelical as you are about the prospects.
Oh, I think it's we're both as passionate as each other about the potential for Kenya, and he has done a lot to put the country on the map, and the next step now is really making sure that we do take that next step and develop and get those explorers in. And I guess the other piece that the government has implemented is this airborne geophysical survey that's been commissioned.
Are you bullish on that? Is that a good idea?
Oh, it's absolutely a good idea, and it's a critical step. We do need to be careful about the expectations of just how much it tells you. But to an explorer, that airborne geophysical survey helps you to understand, the geological structures here, and helps you to understand where you'd want to be looking. It tells you where the elephant country is, so to speak, and helps you to focus that. So that's been a really big investment that's starting in 2018, and a really important step. So the ingredients are all there.
I come from Mombasa, and Kwale was a very depressed part of the coastline. If I go back to my childhood, there wasn't really that much economic activity going on. I don't know why, all that while ago. Now, if you go back, Base Titanium's Kwale operation, largest mining project in Kenya, what are the contributions and benefits it has provided at the national level? And also at the local level? Yeah.
Well, starting at the national level, we started off with a $340 million US investment. That was the construction cost. We're actually in the middle of doing a $32 million improvement to the operation. So it's quite a substantial investment. I guess that equates to 35 billion shillings in current money, so very significant.
Into a brand new mining sector.
That's right, and along with that comes quite an investment in infrastructure. About 5 billion shillings in roads, dam, power lines, port facility that will all be there long after the mine's gone. So significant development from that perspective. We're also we represent nearly 60% of the mining industry. So it's a very significant contributor. We're the largest exporter from Kenya by tonnage.
Of anybody?
Of anything. And we're the biggest source of trade with China, as another interesting statistic. And that's all according to the Kenya Bureau.
Into China.
Yep.
Yes.
Kenya Bureau of Statistics. Interestingly enough...
so you're doing something to balance our
trying to balance
deficit.
We're doing our best. We're now, Kenya is now the single biggest importer of ilmenite into China worldwide. So. And beyond that, we actually got commissioned Ernst & Young a few years ago to undertake a study looking at the breadth of our economic impact, and the estimate was that over the life of the mine we'd contribute around 100 billion shillings to GDP. A very significant amount to government revenues. I think from memory it was about 23 or 24 billion shillings in totality. On top of that, it identified that for 650 direct jobs would generate about another 1,500 jobs in immediate contractors, and then induce another 1,400 jobs in downstream industries. So that for every one job we created, there was another 4.3 or 4.4 jobs created. So really significant. 87% or 84% of our annual spend beyond wages are spent with Kenyan businesses, and that equates to...
that's a large amount.
It is a lot. It's about 37...
specialist company.
37 or 38 million US dollars each year is spent in the Kenyan economy, and all of the stimulus that entails. And what I didn't mention before was about a bit over 30% of the total capex was spent in Kenya with Kenyan suppliers. So it's had a very big effect in that sense. Now we're quite a significant employer of local people, 97% Kenyan.
And you had a unique strategy, didn't you? You actually employed people who were qualified by the proximity to the mine.
Yeah, that's right. So we had an active approach of biasing employment priority to local areas and sort of stepping further out. And that approach has enabled us to employ 63% of the 64% of the labour force is from Kwale County, and as I said, 97% is from Kenya. The other impact it's had at a national level is we've absolutely put Kenya on the map in a global mining sense. I mean, our development here is regarded as a very successful mineral development. It doesn't matter where you are. We've achieved world's best practice safety levels. We've now worked nearly 12 million man-hours without what we call in the mining industry a lost time injury, where someone is
12 million man-hours.
12 million man-hours, 4 years, which is an exceptional safety performance.
But that's really a cultural issue. You created that culture in the organisation.
Yeah, it is. It definitely comes from a top-down expectation of what's acceptable and how safety needs to be, but it's also a function of the capability of a Kenyan workforce to really embrace a world's best class, best in the world sort of class safety system in an industry they're not familiar with. So, it's been a fantastic success. It's not only globally that we're recognised as a success. Kenya's recognised it, and last year we were officially anointed with the title of flagship project within Vision 2030. That's a badge we very proudly hold. I talk about it every time I'm asked to speak anywhere in the world. And it is a really good recognition, and I think it's given us some additional focus on the additional values we can bring in terms of our industrial training model and sharing that in Kenya, our safety model, sharing that, and really providing a benchmark that other companies can follow.
And you're being very modest, but I saw a few words that Julie Bishop made, and it gave you high praise indeed for what you'd achieved.
Yeah, that was exceptional. I certainly wasn't expecting that. It was at the Africa Down Under conference last year to have the foreign minister in her keynote address really only mention one company in terms of a company that's doing it the right way in Africa, and talking about us was fabulous.
Let me now bring you down to Kwale County. Tell us a little bit about how the Kwale mine impacted life at the county level.
Yeah, I mean, the first key thing is that under the new Mining Act, royalties, they're payable to the national government, but they're to be split with 80% to 70% to the national government, 20% to the county, 10% to the local community. So that's in place. The mechanism hasn't quite been put in place yet to actually give effect to that flow down of royalties, but when it does, there are significant numbers there. On the basis of sort of current run rate, you would see something like $800,000 a year going to the county government, $400,000 US to the community. So they're quite significant numbers, but getting the framework right to actually manage that in a way that generates the outcome we'd all like to see still needs a bit of work. Beyond that, we explicitly incorporate our community development management plan in with the county's integrated management plan, so that we're in lockstep with them. We also bring in a lot of outside funding to our programs beyond just ourselves. I mean, we've provided over the last 4 years, $10 million, I should say, billion shillings.
Over 4 years.
Over 4 years to direct community works. That's also brought in funding from other groups.
I went to a hospital where they were creating a blood bank because I found this personally. My father was in the hospital, and they were calling me in Nairobi, asking me to come to Mombasa and give blood. So those were separate to the county initiatives.
That's right. Or they were initiatives that the county or the communities have identified as priorities. So we don't just go out and do our whatever we think is in the best interest of the community. We talk to the community and understand what their needs are and what their priorities are. And one of those was a blood bank at the Msambweni Referral Hospital, and it's the first in Kenya outside a metropolitan area.
Yes. So
it's a very significant step, and one that was definitely needed in the area.
And then I also saw that you made a big effort in cotton farming. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And then you multiplied that money, didn't you? You got some support from other entities.
Yeah, we've brought a lot of participants into it because it's a really quite innovative program for Africa. We've now got about 2,000 farmers in the program. In a cooperative structure.
Yes, somewhere around the mine, or
yeah, around the mine, but it's actually it expands quite away from the mine now. Just really prioritising where the needs are and where we get the best results. But we've got them all in organised farming activity where the program provides inputs, agronomy support, training, access to global markets, and really gets everybody working together in a way that maximises the value from what they're doing, and the results have been superb. I mean, we've got in the program we've got cotton, potatoes, sorghum, we've got honey, spices, poultry. All manner of
I saw one of your poultry farm that you were supporting. You also had a process of giving chickens out, right?
Yeah, I mean that's how we get the program moving. It's a great program, that poultry program, because it really does focus activity around the women in the community and the women's groups, which is somewhere we'd like to see some development. So a very successful program. We're now seeing a large number of farmers who are generating a a really meaningful income for the first time, and it is really transformational and something that we're trying to really explicitly align with the government's agenda around agricultural development.
I think that was a really fantastic calling card of yours and what you've done there. I mean, I've seen many other no one I've seen actually get to the granularity to understand and then actually deliver.
Yeah, it is really resonating with people, and it's the best way to have a broad-based economic impact and one that lasts beyond the life of the mine. So it's been significant, and we'd like to see it expand.
As Kenya embarks on developing its mining sector, how has BASE found the labour market? Is there the right mix of education, skills and experience? Because this kind of skills and experience takes years of having a mining economy to develop. How have you found it?
Kenya has an incredible competitive advantage in Africa in education. It is extraordinary. I mean, we've been able, as newcomers really in industrial large-scale mining, to attract graduates of a very high calibre into our organisation in all manner of disciplines. Even in disciplines in direct mining, the geology graduates in Kenya are technically as good as the graduates from universities in Australia. They are very, very competent. So we've been able to fill those sort of positions, and we find in the broader sort of disciplines of environmental management and finance and everything else, have no problem finding the people we need. And to have an organisation that performs as well as we do, with a 97% Kenyan workforce, it's a real reflection of the education system, but our ability to add value to that beyond. We've delivered something like 58,000 hours of structured training.
Is that right?
Yeah, to our workforce, and it's in disciplines that aren't just those directly relevant to the company's operations. We take the opportunity to provide some broadening education as well, but that's enabled us to now more than halve the number of expatriates that we started the operation with, and something that a lot of people don't realise. They see this large first world mining best practice operation and think that there's 300 expatriates running around running it. We run the whole place with I think it's 27 expatriates now.
My goodness.
And we're really focused on trying to move as many of our high-performing Kenyans up the management ladder as we can.
Because this has been a challenge for Africa, right? Skills transfer and all that kind of thing, and a mantra really for leadership in Africa, looking to get that done. And that's great to hear from you that you've managed that.
There were so many good reasons for doing it, quite apart from the philanthropic reasons. I mean, ultimately, there's a very strong economic driver to localise the operation. It's and something that our guys, as in the expatriates who started with us, really valued when they took the job, was the opportunity to train up a Kenyan workforce. And it's amazing, if you get the right people, they actually quite enjoy making themselves redundant.
That's something. So tell us, you've described this journey that BASE has taken. Tell us about the future, Tim. Where do you go next? What happens next?
Okay, well, the future for Kwale, or the Kwale operation, on the basis of the reserve we have today, we have 5 years of mining left. We undertook some exploration work over the last couple of years. It was quite successful, just preliminary stuff around the mine. That's identified some additional resources that'll probably give us another 15 months on top of that. So we've got a bit over six years of mining on the basis of what we know now. Unfortunately, at the end of that 6 years, the consequence is the operation ceases. We pack up, and things like the economic contribution goes away, the community development contribution goes away. The basic contribution to the mining industry in terms of its development and Kenya's ability to hold up the flagship mining project goes away. Because of that, it is absolutely vital that we find additional resource, and we can see some real potential there. We've been granted quite a significant area of additional exploration tenure, but that was back in 2016, and that's a big focus for us right now. we're very keen to get in there and
Does
start.
that extend it beyond the 5 years you're talking?
And that's what we're looking to add to,
Yeah.
is to add to that 5 years, so that we do continue to provide all the various benefits and stimulus we do to the Kenyan economy, and obviously, you know, continue to have a very healthy operation that contributes to base's performance. But you know, in order for that to happen, we can do the exploration quite happily, but you know, we've got to have a strong degree of collaboration with the national government, county government, and community leadership in order to make that happen.
I would have thought you have that support, don't you?
Oh, we do. We
Yes.
do. I mean, there's strong demonstrated support from the national government and the county government, but unfortunately, the perennial problem with a lot of exploration in Kenya is political interference.
Yes.
At a local level.
Do you
Unfortunately,
still experience that?
yeah, there's a bit of that going on at the moment, which is pretty disappointing. A lot of it is not necessarily driven by genuine concern about community or national interest, and tends to be a little more about personal interest. But
Yes.
in order to get past those sorts of things and just not give the air to that sort of behaviour, it's really important to have that high degree of collaboration with the government. And it's very important, coming back to the comments I made earlier about the critical next step for the mining industry in Kenya is attracting exploration. Foreign mining companies and domestic mining interests as well, they pay really close attention to what's happening to those who are already in a country, and it's not really a helpful look to have the major mining operation in the country being sort of finding it difficult to do what's clearly in the best interest of all stakeholders.
Politics, I'm afraid. You announced the acquisition of Toliara, which is in Madagascar. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what informed that purchase and how you financed it, and the size of it, and what does it do?
Yeah, Toliara in Madagascar is a very similar project to Kwale in terms of the commodity and everything
It's the
else.
same?
Yeah, it's squarely in our expertise zone. This acquisition is unquestionably a transformational one for Base. It's a project we've liked for a long time. We studied 40 odd
mineral sand
projects around the world, and this was the one we just kept coming back to as the one we felt we could add some base magic to, and see it as the best undeveloped project in the world. It's likely to be developed at a fairly similar scale to Kwale in terms of if you were to go and see the operation, it would look quite similar to Kwale. Similar sort of capital cost, maybe a little bit bigger, but very similar in all other respects. And it's the big difference though is the size of the resource. It's what's in the ground there now, without having done any further extensional exploration, is more than 4 times the size of what we started with at Kwale.
Wow.
So we would expect to see it as a 40+ year mining operation. So it's really going to provide that long life sort of spine to the development of the company.
Where do you see the business 5 years from now?
Wow. 5 years from now, I'd like to believe that we would be looking at Kwale with still a number of years left to go.
Yes.
And ideally I'd like to see at least 5 years left to go in 5 years' time, and continuing to operate in the way it is and continuing to be that flagship Kenyan project. I'd like to see Toliara in production. We think we can have that operation in production in the second half of 2021. We would then like to be developing or have in our hand a number of pipeline of future opportunities to move on to beyond that and continue to renew the company, while we can see that those opportunities are really strongly beneficial to shareholder returns. Ultimately, our objective with Base has always been to build a company that was the first thought of company when people were considering truly successful mineral development in Africa. And by that I mean when shareholders are thinking about it, when governments are thinking about it, communities, NGOs, employees, our competitors, when they're thinking about a company that's actually really got this right, I'd like that to be Base, and that's certainly the way I'd like us to be seen in 5 years' time. I think if we could say that and it was recognised as broadly as that constituency, I think we've banged it out of the park.
Well, I think you've banged it out of the park already in these few years that I've known you. Tim, I just want to ask a couple of other questions. Sure. Share price, you know, you've had this acquisition, you've been paying down debt like a maniac. I mean, how much have you paid down in the last 12 months?
Well, probably in the last quarter.
Yes.
We reduced our net debt by about 20 million US dollars.
What's the net debt today then?
We're down at 66 million of net debt. So net debt is the debt we owe, less the cash that we have available to us. So, you know, at the current rate of repayment, you know, we'd expect to be debt free at the end of this year, which would be a rather nice change after starting with 225 million in debt. So, yeah, we've come a long way in that respect, and the way we've been able to pay that down and the way we've conducted the business has resulted in a lender group that...
you must have a very bullish lender group.
Oh, look, they've had a good experience,
yes.
And you know, they express a strong desire to be involved with us in the future in whatever we do next. So.
Final question, you know, the commodity markets obviously, I remember when we first started speaking, they boomed, we had the bust, we've had this boom again. What's going on in your head? How do you see it now?
Oh, we went through a wild ride. I mean, almost unlike any other commodity.
I remember looking at it, and I couldn't even pick up the phone to you at one time. I was so...
Oh, it was extraordinary. We got to the end of 2010, and we basically, mid-2010, we basically had flat prices for all three of our products for a long time. And that had resulted in a pretty low investment in the sector. And all of a sudden, you know, demand caught up with supply, and everyone was looking at each other wondering where supply was going to come from, and we saw prices just take off. And just to use an example, I mean, zircon went from probably $500 a tonne to $3,000 a tonne over the course of a couple of years, 18 months. And we had this incredible spike. And that resulted in some new operations, you know, getting funded ourselves, for example, and a couple of others around the world. But then unfortunately at around the same time we had a significant increase in production out of China, and the market almost as quickly as it went up, it came down. And you know, from the moment we started production in 2013, we were just watching a declining commodity price, and that continued right through until the middle of 2016. So it was a long period.
That was a long period.
It was, and it was difficult. I mean, at one stage, I think 80% of world supply of ilmenite was unprofitable on any measure. So yeah, it was unsustainable. It was really difficult. So we got down. Ilmenite fell from $300 a tonne to $55. And what we've seen now is a bit of a recovery. I actually wouldn't call it a boom again. It's we're really seeing some recovery in prices, back to a more rational level where supply and demand actually makes sense now. And
is the market more efficient? I mean, you know, when the market came down, did a lot of people get taken out of
not really. A bit of supply sort of disappeared onto the sidelines, but now demand has just continued to grow. One of the things with our products is, say for example, the titanium dioxide that we produce, ilmenite and rutile. Most people think that goes into titanium metal. A small amount does, about 4%. The rest of it goes into the production of pigment. So everything we see in the world with a colour has a titanium dioxide pigment in it. As a consequence, it's very lifestyle sort of products. The consumption is very tightly tied to global GDP. So we just see this nice steady climbing in
So you love this
demand.
type of GDP environment we're in?
It's nice and consistent and predictable. Where it becomes a little more unpredictable in our sector is on the supply side. That's really what you need to understand to have a view on where prices are going. And what we're seeing now, demand's caught up, prices are having to rise to bring some of that marginal supply back in, particularly with ilmenite. There is full utilisation of zircon supply now, so that's going to be an interesting price environment in the next 12 months or so. And eventually a point's going to come where new supply is going to be required, and we certainly see that. And you know, our view is sulphate ilmenite 2021 is an interesting sweet spot, and hence why we're very keen to time the acquisition of Toliara and get that into production in that timetable.
And you've completed that acquisition now?
Yeah, we settled it about 3 weeks ago. We paid 75 million US for it. There's some deferred consideration to come as well, but we raised 100 million Australian on the stock market in December. And
via rights issue?
Yeah, it was mostly via rights issue, but also a placement component with it. And we took the opportunity to bring some new institutional shareholders onto the register. We've got a very healthy looking share register that's got some of the really good names in mining investment around the world, and they're very supportive of what we do.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.